Hello, everybody. My name is Katie Farrell, and I run a healthy website. So I was working as a labor and delivery nurse. I started sharing some of my healthy recipes and bringing them into
Hi,
work.
Jennifer. This is Jessica Doletsky. I was calling to see if I could make
And
an appointment to come in.
I think, okay, there we go. All right. We just had somebody talking. I think they were mute, not muted. So just I started sharing recipes, bringing them into work. All the staff started to say, "Hey, can I have this recipe? It's so good. I can't believe it's healthy." And then I started a website. Lo and behold, a few years later, went full time into doing Dashing Dish as what it is now. So, my nursing background gave me a lot of kind of background on why food and nutrition is important for our health. But my background with eating disorders when I was a teenager really helped me understand how nutrition not only affects our physical bodies, but also our emotional health as well. So, up here on the screen is a little bit about my life now. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and my husband and I have been married for 12 years. And then this is my family. I have two sisters who have little kids as well. And so we all kind of just are raising our families together. And so, for all the families, when I was asked to do this, I just thought about how much it can be hard and difficult as a mom with little kids, just doing the day to day. But then thinking about the added stressors of having kids that are not well, that can be really a challenge when it comes to thinking about taking care of ourselves. And so I started to think about, you know, what are some ways that I could help facilitate taking care of your body and also your emotional health as well, because I really believe that they're all tied together and they're all one. That's what I'll be sharing about today. Is really about when we think about the health of our physical bodies, it really does impact our emotions, our mental health, and vice versa, right? When our souls are healthy, then it helps our physical bodies work right. And a really simple breakdown of that, just kind of, you guys probably don't even need proof and examples. You probably already are living this day to day. But I just think about how when you're really stressed out, how that affects your physical body in so many ways, even if it's just something like a tension headache or a stomach ache. And so we see how these kind of balance together. And so that's what we're going to talk about is how can we take care of our physical self so that we're better equipped emotionally and mentally to deal with everything that's going on, and then vice versa. How do we take care of our emotions and our souls so that we're able to really thrive in our physical health? So, first of all, I'm going to talk about some ways that we can nourish our physical bodies, and start there, start with the physical. And a lot of times, I feel like when people get overwhelmed in life, when there's so much going on, that's kind of like the last thing on our minds, right? Is just taking care of our physical bodies. It's like that'll just have to move to the side. But as I said, in the beginning, if we take care of our physical health, then that will help us deal better with our emotions and with everything that's going on mentally. And so it is really a priority. And also, of course, if you're parents, it's important. It's just like I always say, if you're on a plane and you put on an oxygen mask first and then you put it on your kids second, right? That's a great analogy. Another way to think about taking care of ourselves is that if we don't take care of ourselves, then eventually, everything around us is going to start to suffer as well. So, what I like to do is I like to break down taking care of our health in a really simple way. It doesn't have to be something crazy where you're going over the top and shopping at Whole Foods and you're, working out every day. It can be really simple. And one of the ways that I like to make it simple is just talk about eating food in its most natural state. And that's a really simple way of saying, is this good for me or is it not? So, clean eating is a term that's been around for a few years, and it's kind of been turned into almost a diet term now. But really, when I started using the word clean eating, it just meant food that's not processed, food in its most natural whole state. Let me know if I freeze again because it's showing my internet saying unstable. So, what does that mean? Foods that if you could pick it up off of a shelf and it's already ready to eat and it's just in a natural state, then you can pretty much bet that it's a clean eating food, and that it's good for you. Now, if you think about foods that are in boxes with a lot of processed ingredients, so animal crackers, let's say, it's not the worst thing in the world to eat that type of thing. The only problem is that when we eat foods that are really man-made and processed, it's not going to fuel our bodies the way that food in the natural state would. And so there's going to be benefits to eating foods in the natural state, and then there's going to be ramifications of eating processed foods. So what are some of the benefits of clean eating? It's going to help you naturally reach and maintain your happy weight. At Dashing Dish, I'm all about teaching finding your healthy happy weight. So when it comes to weight loss and dieting, like all of that, I'm just pushing all of that aside and saying, how can we actually help your body reach a place where it's healthy and happy? And so that's what I mean by happy weight. And you'll be able to reach and maintain that if you're eating foods that your body was designed to eat. You'll have increased energy, improved digestion, controlled cravings, decreased risk of disease, and improved insulin regulation. And a lot of times people think that insulin regulation is something that is for diabetics, but actually, all of us have insulin that's always trying to be stabilized and always trying to find its balance. Now, when we eat foods that are unprocessed, then a lot of times our blood sugar finds a nice happy state. And so you can see how all of these things are really important. A lot of times when we think about health and we think about foods, eating healthy, we think about losing weight, but really there's so much more that goes into why we choose the foods that we do. So let's talk about some simple swaps. If you're like, okay, I've been living off goldfish and my kids, PB&J sandwiches, and I just, that's like, I don't even know where to start when you're talking about eating clean eating foods. Well, some simple swaps are right here. We have just 5 things that are just really simple you could start today. So instead of white sugar, that's always the first one I start with. White sugar is actually really, really processed and highly addictive. Just so many things that I could say. You just want to stay away from white sugar as much as possible. So instead of white sugar, a natural alternative would be stevia, monk fruit sweetener, maple syrup, coconut sugar, and honey. So if you've tried stevia or monk fruit and you're like, no, that's not for me, coconut sugar is actually really pretty similar in taste to brown sugar and is all natural. It's made from, the sugar of coconuts, maple syrup, and honey. So those are great natural sweeteners. Instead of white flour, you could try oat flour, almond flour, coconut flour, and even peanut flour. So these are all flours that are basically derived from what it says. So oat flour is derived from whole grain oats, almond flour from almonds, coconut flour from coconuts, and so on. So they basically just take it and then they grind it up, dehydrate it, turn it into a flour. So much more nutritious, and your body recognizes it as actual food rather than white flour, which is so heavily processed in so many chemicals, even bleached, that a lot of times your body is just trying to figure out how to even regulate when you put it in the form of a meal or a snack. Instead of white pasta, so you can see a lot of white stuff, which is really void of nutrition, we're replacing it with something that is colorful and something that is naturally found in nature. You could try brown rice pasta, quinoa, a veggie swap for pasta, so spaghetti squash, zucchini noodles, cauliflower rice. Those are all really good options instead of pasta or rice. Instead of butter or canola oil, you could try unsweetened applesauce, Greek yogurt, coconut oil, avocado oil, or nut butters. So those are all really good healthy fats that you can use as swap outs in baking and in cooking. And then processed snacks. So again, like goldfish, anything that's just white or void of nutrition. try and replace those with real food snacks with protein and fiber. So maybe an apple, some Greek yogurt, string cheese, almonds, all of those things are great snacks that nature made. And then also, I like to make my own snacks, but we'll get to that in a little bit, where we can talk about some delicious ways of making your own snacks. So, when it comes to eating healthy, one of the things that I always teach on is having a plan, because having a plan is like the ABCs of learning how to spell. If you don't have a plan, most likely you're going to end up pulling through a drive-through. You're going to call, DoorDash or get delivery. And there's nothing wrong with that from time to time. And same with even the white foods that we talked about. There's nothing wrong with having a piece of white bread or, any of that. It's all about balance. But what I try to aim for and what I encourage is to have most of what your time is spent doing and most of what you're putting in your body as having a nutritious option or having a plan. It doesn't have to always be perfect. And I myself, and I do this for a living, am not perfect at it. But I will tell you that having a plan keeps you from having just, all kinds of crazy things happen where you're just kind of, like I said, ordering DoorDash every single night and all of that and not feeling so good by the end of the week. So, some ways that you can have a plan is you can just start, any day of the week, but I like to start with Sunday or Monday. So, in the beginning of my week, and I like to look at my schedule for the week. And I like to say, okay, I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm, super busy. And then from there on, it's not as busy. And then I like to plan and make sure I at least have something planned, if for nothing else, those 3 days that are going to be really busy in my week. And then the days that aren't so busy, I can kind of make do and figure things out. So that's really helpful to have a look at your overall week. The second thing is to write out a meal plan for your week. So start with something simple. If you've never written out a meal plan before or you don't meal plan, start with maybe just your busiest time of day. So for me, that's dinner. Whenever it's like 5 o'clock rolling around, it's like I'm still working and things are just happening. Everyone's coming home, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a plan. What am I going to feed everyone? And everyone's hungry. So I would recommend taking your busiest time of day, if that's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and start there. If this is totally new to you. And then the next thing would be to create a shopping list. So on Dashing Dish, we have a meal plan builder, a shopping list builder. It's super simple to use. You literally click add to, meal plan, or you drag and drop recipes into it. And that way it just makes it for you. It makes your shopping list for you. Or you could use a good old pen and paper or your iPhone, your smartphone. So some ways that you can, roll out this meal plan once you start is with six steps to prep. And this is what I've been doing for years and years and years. And I promise you that if nothing else, if you can pick a few of these, doesn't have to be all six, but just a few of these, it will help you have such a successful week when it comes to eating healthy. The first thing that I like to do is I like to prep some proteins. So, let's say that you have your meal plan made up, you have your dinners that you're going to make, you're like breakfast and lunch, I'll figure it out, I'll have leftovers, I'll grab something quick. That's totally fine. But if you're going to have dinners planned out for the week, let's say 3 to 5 dinners, something that can be really helpful for you is to get your proteins for those meals prepped ahead of time. So again, let's say I picked a Sunday to do this and I order all my groceries and I, start to plan. What I like to do is I like to throw some chicken in a crock pot for shredded chicken, or even buy a rotisserie chicken. It's easy to add to recipes. You could do roasted chicken tenders in the oven, 425 for like 15 minutes. You put a bunch of chicken tenders in there, and then you can add them to your dinners throughout the week. Same thing with like if you want to do skillet chicken, or cook up some ground beef or some turkey, or even form the turkey, the burger patties, but you don't actually cook them. These are just some simple ways to get your protein ready to go so that you're not thinking, oh my gosh, I have to boil noodles, I have to cook my, beef, I have to, before even making dinner. So that's something that I like to do, is have a few of my proteins prepped for the meals that I plan. Another option is to, if you want to go a little more extensive, is to prep your produce and your pasta. So all I do for this is I take one big colander, and I use it for all my prep. So I wash a bunch of bell peppers, zucchini, apples, whatever I'm planning to have for the week and whatever I'm going to put into meals. I lay them all onto one big dish towel on my counter and just kind of cut them up or just dry them. And then I put them back in the fridge. And that helps so much to have vegetables and fruit just washed, because that in itself can be a process, right? Another thing I like to do with that same colander is to boil my pastas for the week or my rice or whatever we're having, and then drain them in the colander, rinse them off with cold water, and then I add a little bit of avocado oil to the pasta, and that keeps it from sticking. If you don't rinse it and add the oil, just a drizzle of oil, then what happens is the pasta will stick when you put it back in the fridge, and then it's hard to make recipes out of. So this is kind of a step further in addition to the protein if you're going to make some, meals ahead of time. So what you're seeing here is I usually don't make one big dish and then put it in my fridge. You certainly could. You could do things in the crock pot like a soup. You could make a casserole and bake it, ahead of time, or just make it and bake it the night of. So these are things that you could do. But if you don't have time to do that on a weekend and take your whole weekend or your whole day to make meals, which I certainly don't, then these are just some simple steps to help it easier on the night that you're actually cooking. I also like to have a few go-to dinners. So what I mean by this is the nights that I don't have time to plan and prepare meals, I like to have a few staples in my back pocket where I can say, oh, I know exactly what we'll have when we get home tonight, even if I didn't plan anything. So for me, that could be a crock pot meal that I started in the beginning of the day, soups, different things where you just dump it all in a crock pot and then it's ready at night is a great option. I also like to have flatbread pizzas. So I have just some whole grain wraps or tortillas, and I put a bunch of sauce and toppings on, whatever people like, and I have everyone have their own pizza. So that's another really quick idea. Breakfast for dinner is something that we do a lot here when I don't make plans for dinner. So pancakes, eggs, sausage. I do usually chicken or turkey sausage, and I just cook it all up on the stove in 15 minutes, and everybody's happy with breakfast for dinner. I also really like to do chicken and beef tacos. So what I do with that is I do the chicken in the crock pot with a jar of salsa, just one pack of chicken, jar of salsa, set it and forget it for the rest of the day. Then I get home in the evening and I make some ground turkey or some beef in a skillet, which takes like 5 minutes. And then everybody can build their own tacos. So that's something that we do a lot as well. So pizza, breakfast, tacos, everybody's happy. So it's really good to have a few dinners for when you don't have time to plan, because it's not always realistic that you will get to plan and prepare. As far as lunches, I like to do things like leftovers a lot of times from dinner. If you want to keep your dinners for the next night, though, and you don't want to use it as a lunch, some things that I like to do that are really simple are sandwiches and wraps. A lot of times people ask me, you talk a lot about white bread. Don't go for that. What's a better option for bread? So there's Dave's Killer Bread, which is in almost every grocery store now, and the ingredients are pretty good on that, and usually it's organic. And so that's a really good sandwich bread that I use for my husband and daughter a lot. Wraps are good as long as you look at the ingredients and they're whole grain. And a lot of times if you can find sprouted grains, that's really good as well. So Ezekiel is another good brand for bread. So put some lunch meat or some bacon on there, some hummus. You can get creative with wraps and sandwiches. And then soups, chilies, and salads. Those are all really good and easy lunch ideas. A lot of times when it's cold, I'll do a big batch of soup or chili, and that's my lunch all week. And then with salads, that's more when it's hot outside. I'll do a bunch of salad toppings, just wash them like I talked about prepping your produce, and I'll kind of cut some stuff up and have it to throw on a bed of lettuce. So that's my lunch for the week. And then have some go to breakfast options. This is another really helpful way to kind of plan and prepare your healthy meals. So, breakfast options are, usually pretty simple. The only thing that I would suggest is just I recommend staying away from cereals and just sugary breakfast, because really breakfast is your most important meal of the day. And we always say that, but it really is true. And so if you can start your day off good, you're going to feel so much better the rest of the day. Again, going back to your insulin, if your blood sugar is stable and happy in the morning, it will carry you through the day much better. So you'll feel better overall. Some great breakfast options are to have some shakes and smoothies. In my shakes and smoothies, I like to do Greek yogurt, ice, and almond milk, and then whatever kind of add ins. So berries, cocoa powder if you want to do chocolate, some peanut butter or nut butter. So there's lots of different things and lots of recipes on Dashing Dish for shakes and smoothies. The only thing I would say stay away from are obviously sugary add-ins. And then oatmeal, you could do overnight oats. You could do just a 2-minute oatmeal. Again, tons of recipes online for those. Um, Egg bakes, hard boiled eggs, breakfast burritos, and sandwiches. And you can make those ahead of time. So just with some English muffins. Again, Dave's Killer and also Ezekiel are two really good brands for breads. They also make English muffins, and you can just put some eggs on there, make them ahead of time, put them all in your fridge. 25-minute bagels, that's a recipe on Dashing Dish. And Greek yogurt with berries and nuts. Easy. So very simple. And these are all things that you could basically run out the door with. And last but not least, prep a few go-to snacks. So when it comes to eating healthy, one of the big things that I think people miss is just a few simple things. One is hydration. If you're not properly hydrated and you're not drinking enough throughout the day, you're probably going to feel like you have cravings and a lot of hunger that is just not satisfied. And really, it's just because you're thirsty. Another thing is not having a good snack between meals. Sometimes people don't think you need one, but I always suggest trying out and having a small snack, even if you don't think you need one, because then when you get to a meal, you'll realize how much easier it is to gauge your natural hunger signals. My husband and I always joke that when we don't have snacks, we're hangry. And that's because we get to the meal and we sit down and we have no clue how full or hungry we actually are. We just want to eat everything in sight and we're grouchy. So we try to have something small between usually lunch and dinner. If you feel like you need something between breakfast and lunch, you could do that too. So some good snack options are some snacks on Dashing Dish, and we're actually going to be making the no bake protein balls in a little bit here. And so I'll show you while I'm making that recipe what I suggest when it comes to snacking. But really, any of the snacks on Dashing Dish are really great snacks. Some store-bought snack ideas would be carrots with hummus, Greek yogurt, Lara bars are great, fruit with some kind of cheese or nut butter, and then some smoothies. And again, I will talk about what to look for when it comes to making or eating a healthy snack. Now let's talk about nourishing the soul. So that's just really like an overview if I were to compress it and condense it into taking care of our physical bodies in just a really small sum up, right? There's obviously a lot more to it, but when it comes to just simply the basics and the foundations of taking care of our bodies, that's what I would share with you is to first of all choose foods in their most natural state. Second of all, try and have some kind of plan for the week, even if it's just for a few days of the week. And then plan for maybe your busiest meal time. And as far as having some kind of plan ahead, if you can prep your proteins, if you can wash, maybe even cut your produce and even boil some pasta, that's going to really set you up for success when it comes to busy weeknights. And then, of course, have your staple meals in your back pocket for when you're busy, have a few lunch and breakfast ideas, and of course, have a few snacks on hand. So that's really what I would say to anybody as far as taking care of our physical body. If you can do those simple, basic things, then you're going to be doing a great job and you're going to feel better taking care of yourself. As far as nourishing our soul, a lot of times when it comes to food and eating and making recipes, it's so much more than just meal planning. And so a lot of times, especially when we're going through stressful situations in life, that is something that I like to touch on as far as nourishing our soul and how that relates to how we eat and what we eat and even why we eat. I know for myself, coming from a disordered eating background, a lot of the times that I really struggled with disordered eating was when I was going through really stressful times in my life. And a lot of times that was because I felt that I didn't have control over my situation, but I did have control over food. And so that led to a lot of unhealthy behaviors and habits with how I dealt with food. And so that really brought forth the understanding in me, knowing personally how food and eating can all really go hand in hand with how we feel on the inside. So a lot of how I learned to find a healthy view of taking care of our bodies started with mindful eating. And what that really means is just understanding what and why we eat. And even understanding these things can really help us in making better choices because we realize it's not just about our weight or our gene size or, eating healthy because we should, but it's more about realizing how food makes us feel on the inside. So, mindful eating, it basically just means to nourish our body and choose foods that do nourish our body instead of eating as a response to something else. So, emotions, events, feeling tired, stressed, etc. And a lot of times it can be really helpful to just take a step back and say, why am I eating this? And, why am I choosing to eat this at this time? And sometimes it can be just stress and it can be just kind of a way of escape for us, right? Where we're just like, okay, so much is going on around me. I don't want to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with it. So if I sit down with this bag of chips and eat the whole thing mindlessly, it'll make me feel better for a moment. But one of the things that I've kind of taught myself, and I like to teach other people, is to think about how did you feel after you did that? A lot of times it can feel like a burden, a weight on us where we're almost like, oh man, I feel so guilty. I wish I didn't do that. Now I feel, like I'm overly, just feeling physically bad. Plus, the stress on top of it didn't go away from eating that. And so it's important to realize what and why we're eating and how we're approaching food. At times, it's okay to eat for reasons other than nourishment. So, if you're going to a birthday party, you're having some cake, you're enjoying fellowship with people, that's totally okay. It doesn't always have to be to nourish our bodies, but it's so important to understand when we're eating out of a response to something other than nourishing our bodies and really addressing that because that can help us to set boundaries. So, some helpful questions to ask is how will I feel as a result of eating this? And that can be when it applies to, emotional eating or mindless eating or whatever it may be. Let's say you're eating, as a response to an event or a feeling. Or it can be just helpful to ask yourself that so that you can start to make better choices. So, let's say you eat a whole bag of Doritos and you're like, man, I feel pretty bad right now. Like I want to go to bed and it's the middle of the day. It can be really helpful to say, okay, next time I think I'm going to choose something a little bit more nourishing for my body because I want to feel better. So that can really help us make better choices physically as well. You can also ask yourself, is this choice beneficial? Is there a better way to handle my emotions and to deal with them? And also, how am I feeling physically? So, really, those are helpful questions to ask as you embark on trying to nourish your body and nourish your soul and really addressing your emotions for what they are. When I was learning how to develop a healthy relationship with food and also learn to get in touch with my emotions and deal with them in a healthy way, one of the things that I found myself doing is I would walk into the kitchen almost mindlessly with everything going on in my head, and I would just physically make myself stop. And I would say, am I truly hungry right now? Or am I looking to fulfill something else? as I kind of approach food. And so that's when I would stop and I would turn around and I would say, okay, let me just sit down for a moment and process the emotions that I'm feeling. And oftentimes that helped me realize that, you know what, I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z emotionally, and it's really weighing me down, and I'm not properly addressing it. And so that really helped me learn how to find a better relationship with food, but also learn to handle my emotions in a better way. And setting healthy boundaries is also a really good way to do this. Like I said, for me, it was about physically turning around, leaving the kitchen, sitting down, and thinking about what is going on here. But there's different ways that people set boundaries that work for them. And so, one of the ways that you can start by making healthy boundaries as it relates to dealing with your emotions, and if you're eating out of a response of stress, events, all of that. Or you're just kind of making choices that aren't good for you physically and nourishing to your body. It can be really helpful to say, okay, this is my weak spot. This is where I really kind of make choices that aren't beneficial to my health. So, understanding what those are is the first step. And then creating boundaries around those, creating structure of saying, okay, maybe at nighttime, that's when I totally zone out and I just say, I don't care what I'm putting into my body, what I'm doing with my health. I'm just doing what feels good at the moment. Maybe it's about turning the lights off and going upstairs physically and leaving your kitchen area. Establishing a backup plan is also really helpful. So, let's say you come home and you had a really hard day and you just don't want to deal with it and you want to order some takeout and just say, forget it all, and we all have those days. Some really helpful things in those moments are to say, okay, if I fall into a day that's extremely challenging and stressful, how am I going to care for my health in those times? And having that backup plan where you know how you're going to respond, whether it's call a friend for support and just talk to them, that can be really, really helpful. Or another healthy way of dealing with your emotions and with everything that's going on in your heart and in your head, having those plans of what am I going to do on those hard days can be really important for managing your emotions and the health of your soul. And also find support and accountability where you need it. I just recently went through a really, really difficult season in my life, and I didn't know how much support and people around me would help in my healing process. And it was amazing to me how just calling friends and calling family and talking things out just helped me so much in healing on the inside. And instead of, resorting to other different ways of managing my emotions, which wouldn't be healthy, having a support system can be one of the most healing things. And so that's something that I strongly recommend for my own personal journey. And then having grace with yourself. That's really the bottom line. And that would be the last thing that I'll end with. All of this is a journey, and health is a journey. It's not like you go on one diet or you try one recipe and you're healthy, right? And a lot of it, like I said, is learning to deal with what's going on the inside, but also, what are some basic things I can do to take care of this physical me. And so that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. There's going to be a lot of things that you learn along the way. Oh, that didn't work. This did work for me. That type of thing. And so it's important to learn what works for you personally. And so a lot of times we go on Pinterest, we go on social media, we try to find quick fixes, we try and find, plans that work for other people, and they just don't work for us. And so it's important to find some things that work for you and your lifestyle and implement those. So now I'm going to bring you into my kitchen and we're going to make a snack. It's one of my favorite snacks. And my 4-year-old daughter is obsessed with these as well. We're going to make some no bake cookie protein balls. And we already made a batch earlier. My daughter saw all of these ingredients when she came home from school, and she loves these. And she said, I want to cook with you, Mom. So I'm making sure you guys can kind of somewhat see what I'm doing here. And then I'll walk you through as I make them. So really the main thing that we want to think about when it comes to making a healthy snack is we want to, or even a meal, is think about a carb, a fat, and a protein, and having those balanced as much as you can. It's not going to be perfect, but having a little bit of all three is going to really help fuel your body and make it work the way it should. So if we're looking at a snack, we're going to have some fat, protein, and carbs in a snack. So this is one way that you can do it, is by making your own homemade snacks right at home. And if you don't have time to even bake, this is a no bake recipe. So super easy. So I'm going to start with oat flour, which is something that we talked about instead of white flour. So oat flour is just old fashioned oats. So we all know that oatmeal is good for us. It's just ground into an oat flour. So I buy this already made. I don't make my own oat flour, but you could. You just take old fashioned oatmeal, like in the container, you blend it in a blender until it's totally fine, like flour. So just like flour, and you just put it into a container. And so the nice thing about that is that you can add it to any baking recipe instead of white flour. So way more nutritious. It has protein. It has a little bit of fiber in it. And so it's going to fuel your body with a good complex carbohydrate. And then we have some protein powder here. Now, protein powder is just a simple way of adding protein to your snacks. So I like to add it into a lot of my baked goods. You can use any kind of protein powder you like. You can get it at almost any stores these days. So a 1/4 cup of protein powder, and then a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You're going to see how easy these are and why I make them for snacks all the time. Now, when I make snacks, a lot of times I double the recipe, so I can just make a whole bunch all at once and put some in my freezer, and that way I don't have to keep making snacks all the time. So I'll like make half for now and half for next week, and then I'm only making snacks twice in a month. So it's much easier. Sweetener of choice. So remember I talked to you about, instead of white sugar, there's coconut sugar, monk fruit, stevia, maple syrup, honey. So I have some stevia here, and I don't normally use liquid sweeteners when I'm baking or doing, any type of sweet recipe. I usually use monk fruit sweetener. It's granulated, so it measures cup for cup like sugar. Or I use coconut sugar a lot. When you start adding liquids to baking, it can kind of mess up the recipe, but that's all I have right now, so it'll work. And then nut butter, so just some organic peanut butter or almond butter works. 2 tablespoons of that. And that's your healthy fat. So we have our protein from the protein powder, our carbs from the oat flour, and then our healthy fat from the peanut butter. And then just a 1/4 cup of applesauce. And that's it. And this is going to come together just like cookie dough. And we're going to roll it into balls. And it is delicious. Oh, and I can't forget the chocolate chips. So I'm just going to give this a quick stir real quick. And it's hard to believe that this would come together in like a cookie dough consistency, but I'll show you what it looks like.
So guys, the whole time Faith has been sick, I've been a Dashing Dish customer. It's like an amazing website. It has all these healthy recipes. My favorite, Katie is a genius. So she has dupes for everything, I swear. But like my favorite things are Hamburger Helper, which I don't even like in real life, but it's so good and my family loves it. Faith and I love her shakes because so she said she puts cottage cheese in, or she said, yeah. So I started putting cottage cheese in, which I know you might turn your nose up, but that was the tip she gave. And honestly, they taste like she's got one that's like a dupe of a Frosty from Wendy's, and it tastes just like it. So it's, yeah, she's kept me very happy with my sweet tooth, and she's got a million pumpkin recipes. So definitely.
That's where it's at, is the pumpkin right now. I'll tell you.
Oh my gosh.
And what I try to do is I try to take out the white stuff out of recipes and the butter and the sugar, and I just replace it with something more nutritious. That's all I really do. is the swaps that I talked about. I don't like come up with anything novel and new. It's just is about making a few swap outs. So when it comes to baking, I use oat flour and almond flour a lot. And then when it comes to, making a casserole, let's say, I use a lot of veggies in them instead of white pasta. So it really is just about making simple swaps. And then we have our chocolate chips. And this is one of my favorite brands. I don't know if you can tell. Lily's chocolate chips are stevia sweetened chocolate chips. And now they have like all kinds of different chocolate chips. Enjoy Life is also a good dairy-free one that my daughter likes because I don't do dairy as much with her. Her stomach used to get all knotted up with dairy. It's getting better, but so there's a lot of different options for chocolate chips now. When I first started Dash Dish, there was like nothing as far as healthy options. So now there's a ton right on any grocery store shelf. It's not just at Whole Foods. Another thing I try to do with my recipes is make it so you don't have to shop at Whole Foods. Everything can be found in a traditional grocery store for the most part. So that's another important thing to me is just make it easy. So here's our dough. You can see it's like cookie dough. And so this just came together by me stirring and mixing it with my hands until it came into like a dough. So it tastes just like cookie dough and looks like cookie dough. So I guarantee you, your kids, you will think that this is like the greatest treat. So I roll it into little balls just like that. And of course you can make them as perfect or not perfect as you want. And then I put them in my freezer in a container. I'll show you my container. Like I said, I already made some earlier with Maddie. So I just have a Tupperware container and I actually just made it into a rectangle. That's like a hack I have. I take this whole dough, I spread it on a parchment sheet and I make it into a rectangle and cut it instead of making balls because a 4-year-old is not very patient in the kitchen. So I just got to do some quick hacks. So I just cut them into little squares and then I'll put them in my freezer. And then you pull them out and you just let them sit for like 2 minutes or you eat them straight out of the freezer. It's like frozen cookie dough. So
Yeah,
that's
I like them straight out of the freezer too.
Yeah, that's a snack that I love. And it kind of just is nice to have snacks that you made. So muffins or bars or things that you made because you know what's in them. But if you don't really have the time to make anything, some good snack options would be like Greek yogurt with some berries, with some nuts, apples. So what I like to do with apples, a way to get carbs, fat, protein, is apple is a carbohydrate, a little bit of fat. I'll do like a tablespoon of peanut butter and then I'll mix some peanut flour in there, which is protein. So if you haven't heard of peanut flour, you will love it if you finally realize what it is. So it's basically just peanut butter with the fat taken out and made into a flour. So PB2, there's a lot of different brands out there, but it's at most grocery stores and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. It's basically peanut butter, but protein powder, if that makes sense. So if you head over to Dash and Dish, there's a lot of different tips and resources and things that I found over the last 12 years that I've been doing it that just makes living a healthy lifestyle easier. So, it's not about, like I said, being perfect, but just finding hacks and tips and ways that it can be easy and enjoyable to live a healthy lifestyle. Because like I said, if you decide I'm going to go for it, I'm going to start to try to make healthy changes and take care of myself, and then it stinks, like you're like, this is disgusting and bland and terrible and hard, you're probably not going to stick with it. And so if it's easy and it's simple, quick, and delicious, you'll probably do it for life. And so that's really what my heart is to encourage people to find a way that is enjoyable so that you actually want to do it. And like I said, I'm not about rules, restrictions, being perfect. I've tried all that in my life, and let me tell you, it backfires, if nothing else. So it really is about finding balance. So that's kind of all I have for you guys today. I wish I could share the cookie dough balls with you through the screen, but you'll have to make them. And if there's a way I can share the recipe with you guys, like a physical printout, I will definitely get that to you. So
I can hook up with you and do, actually, I'll have Colleen stay on with you if you don't mind, Colleen. So do we have like 2 minutes? Does anyone have any quick questions for Katie? So guys, Katie's kind of a celebrity. I don't know if you realize, I've had a couple people send me messages and say, I recognize her. She has a cooking show. She does a lot of really great faith-based stuff. If you go to her, like Instagram is the best place to find it. She has like an amazing family. I knew her mom from years ago. So I'm so excited to get her involved with this group of people because she has such a huge heart. When Faith used to be in the hospital, I would send her messages years ago and say, can you think of a way I could modify this? And she would always answer my questions so I could make like snacks that were healthy for Faith in the hospital. So she's always been one of my favorite people to refer people to. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. Anybody have any questions? Colleen or not? Colleen's been like waiting. She's like, I want to talk to her. I have so much I want to say.
Well, I'll save my questions. All I want to add is that my husband and I, we meal prep every Sunday, and it is one of the most helpful things. I mean, I have 2 kids and he has a full-time job. I have a full-time job. And so we're kind of health nuts in the sense of like, we like to have a plan. And I can't tell you the stress is taken off my husband and I coming home at night and not saying, okay, what's for dinner? So we meal prep a lot, whether if it's like just our lunches Monday through Friday or plan out or even our dinners. And that has lifted so much stress and anxiety. So I'm a complete proponent of meal prepping. That's like the key to a success in our marriage, at least. So yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't agree with that more. A lot of times when it's really busy at our house or a lot of stress is already going on, around us, I always say, I don't know how people survive without some kind of plan, because I would probably end up eating chips on a plate with some melted cheese or something. Like, what would I eat if I had nothing planned on the stressful days, So it really is, it takes so much stress off of you.
So our director of camping, Patrick, is one of those people that he's like, what's wrong with chips and cheese? That's what he's thinking. Yeah, see, I told you. He's like, that's my meal all the time.
There's no shame. No shame. You might want to think about setting some boundaries around those chips, though. Just saying, you might want to dish out a little bowl.
I thought a serving was just whatever the bag was that they came in.
It is pretty crazy, the serving size of chips. You're like, 2 chips? Who eats that?
Katie, thank you for sharing your talents with our group. I'm honored to have you here today, and I'm so glad that people got to meet you. So thank you for being here with us today.